On December 26, 1996, at 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey dialed 911. Her voice was frantic, desperate. "We have a kidnapping," she screamed into the phone. "There's a ransom note." But 8 hours later, in the basement of that same house, her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was found dead. And the ransom note? It would become the most analyzed piece of evidence in American crime history. Because what it revealed about that night contradicts everything the family claimed. This is the story of a case that has haunted investigators, divided public opinion, and left more questions than answers for nearly 3 decades. A case where every piece of evidence seems to point in a different direction. A case where the truth has been buried under layers of media sensation, false leads, and family secrets. Tonight we unlock the JonBenét Ramsey case like never before, examining the evidence that points to what really happened in that Boulder, Colorado mansion. Boulder, Colorado. Christmas 1996. The Ramsey family appeared to have it all. John Ramsey, a successful businessman worth over $6 million. Patsy Ramsey, a former beauty queen turned devoted mother. And their children, including 6-year-old JonBenét, a child beauty pageant star whose smile lit up every stage she performed on. They lived in a sprawling 15-room Tudor mansion in one of Boulder's most affluent neighborhoods. To the outside world, they were the perfect American family. But on the morning after Christmas, that image would shatter forever. Before we dive deeper into this investigation, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Here at True Crime Vault, we unlock the cases that deserve to be remembered. New investigations every week. And if you think you know this case, trust me, what you're about to hear will change everything. The timeline of December 25th starts innocently enough. The Ramseys spent Christmas Day visiting friends, attending a dinner party at the home of Fleet and Priscilla White. According to everyone present, nothing seemed unusual. The family appeared happy, relaxed. JonBenét was excited, playing with her older brother Burke and the other children. They left the Whites' home around 9:30 p.m. John Ramsey would later say JonBenét fell asleep in the car. He carried her inside and put her to bed, still wearing the clothes she'd worn to the party. Patsy claimed she checked on JonBenét around 10 p.m. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. But sometime between 10 p.m. on December 25th and 5:52 a.m. on December 26th, something happened in that house. Something that would end a little girl's life and create one of the most controversial murder investigations in American history. When Patsy Ramsey came down the spiral staircase at 5:52 that morning, she said she found a ransom note laid out on the steps. Not crumpled, not hidden, laid out, impossible to miss. The note was 2.5 pages long, written on a pad of paper from inside the Ramsey home, using a pen that was also from inside the house. And what it said was bizarre. The note demanded exactly $118,000 for JonBenét's safe return. $118,000, not a round number. Not $1 million like you'd expect for a wealthy family, but $118,000, which happened to be the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent bonus from his company. The writer claimed to represent a small foreign faction. They called themselves gentlemen who respected John's business, but would kill JonBenét if he didn't follow instructions. They said they'd call between 8 and 10 a.m. with delivery instructions. They warned John not to contact police, not to tell anyone, or his daughter would be beheaded. Patsy called 911 immediately. The call would be analyzed thousands of times over the next 3 decades. Her voice panicked, screaming about a kidnapping, about the ransom note, about her missing daughter. The operator asked if she'd checked the entire house. Patsy said yes. But here's what makes this crucial. At the end of that 911 call, before the line disconnected, enhanced audio analysis would later reveal voices in the background. Voices that suggested the entire family might have been awake and together when that call was made, despite claims that Burke was asleep in his room. Boulder police arrived at the Ramsey home at 5:59 a.m., 7 minutes after the 911 call. Officers Linda Arndt and Rick French were first on scene. What they found was chaos. Friends and family had already been called and were arriving at the house. John Ramsey's friend Fleet White was there. Reverend Raul Hoverstock from the family's church arrived. People were moving through the house, potentially contaminating what should have been a crime scene. And here's where the investigation took its first critical misstep. The officers on scene treated this as a kidnapping, not a potential murder scene. They didn't seal off the house. They didn't preserve evidence. They allowed people to walk freely through rooms, touching surfaces, using bathrooms, cleaning up. Officer Rick French did conduct an initial search of the house. He went room to room, including the basement. He even approached the wine cellar door in the basement, a small room with a wooden door secured by a simple latch. He testified later that he tried the door, found it latched, and didn't force it open. He moved on. That decision would haunt him forever. Because behind that door, JonBenét was already there, already dead, already positioned in a way that would fuel decades of speculation about what really happened that night. The hours ticked by. 8 a.m. came and went. No call from the kidnappers. 9 a.m. 10 a.m. The deadline in the ransom note passed. Nothing. John Ramsey paced the house. Patsy was described as hysterical, medicated by her doctor who had arrived at the house. And Detective Linda Arndt, the only officer remaining at the scene by late morning, was growing increasingly uneasy. She'd asked for backup hours earlier but was told none was available. She was alone in a house full of people, in what she believed was a kidnapping that wasn't following any normal pattern. At 11 a.m., Detective Arndt made a decision that would change everything. She asked John Ramsey and Fleet White to search the house one more time, top to bottom, to see if they could find anything the police had missed. John and Fleet started in the basement. They checked the train room where Burke played. They looked through storage areas, and then John Ramsey walked to that wine cellar door. The door that Officer French had found, latched hours earlier. John reached for the latch and opened it. What happened next was captured in his immediate scream. "Oh my God, oh my God!" Fleet White heard it and ran to the doorway. There, in the darkness of that small basement room, JonBenét's body lay on the floor. She was wearing a white long-sleeved shirt and white long johns. A white cord was tied around her neck, fashioned into a garrote with a broken paintbrush handle twisted into it. Her mouth was covered with duct tape. Her hands were tied loosely above her head with white cord. And there was something else. A small blanket was nearby and she'd been wrapped in it. John Ramsey did something that would complicate the investigation even further. He removed the duct tape from her mouth. He untied her hands. He picked up his daughter's body and carried her upstairs, away from the crime scene. Detective Arndt saw him emerge from the basement, JonBenét's body in his arms, and in her later testimony, she said something chilling. She said at that moment, she looked into John Ramsey's eyes and knew. Knew what, exactly? She never fully explained, but her testimony suggested she believed right then that the family was involved. JonBenét was laid on the floor in the hallway near the Christmas tree. The remaining detective, the friends, the family members all saw her there, but it was too late. Whatever evidence had been in that wine cellar, whatever the crime scene might have told investigators, had been compromised. John had moved the body. He'd touched the tape, the cords, his daughter's clothing. The basement area had been walked through multiple times, and the house itself had been full of people for hours, potentially destroying evidence, contaminating surfaces, eliminating any chance of isolating specific DNA or fingerprints or footprints. The coroner arrived at 8 p.m. that evening. JonBenét's body had been laying in that hallway for hours. The autopsy would be conducted the next day, and what it revealed would make this case even more disturbing. The official cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation associated with cranial cerebral trauma. In simpler terms, she'd been struck in the head with tremendous force, causing a skull fracture that spread 8.5 inches across her skull, and she'd been strangled with the cord wrapped around her neck, the makeshift garrote twisted so tightly that it left a furrow in her skin. But the timeline of these injuries would become critical. The medical examiner determined that the head blow came first. It fractured her skull so severely that it caused immediate brain swelling and bleeding. Some experts believed this blow alone would have been fatal within a matter of hours, even without medical intervention. But she wasn't dead yet when the strangulation occurred. The corrosion marks on her neck, the petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, the evidence of her body's response to lack of oxygen. All of this proved she was still alive, at least minimally, when someone fashioned that garrote and twisted it around her neck. There was more. The autopsy revealed evidence of vaginal trauma, small abrasions inside and around the vaginal area, blood in her underwear, and evidence of prior trauma, older injuries that had healed. This discovery would lead to one of the most controversial aspects of the case. Had JonBenét been sexually abused before the night she died? Some experts said yes, absolutely, the evidence was clear. Others said the findings were inconclusive, that the injuries could have been from other causes, from innocent childhood accidents or medical conditions. The grand jury would later hear testimony about this evidence, and what they concluded would not be revealed to the public for 17 years. Let's return to that ransom note, because the more investigators examined it, the stranger it became. Handwriting experts were brought in immediately. The pad of paper it was written on came from inside the Ramsey house, a pad Patsy used for making lists. The pen used to write it was also from inside the house, found placed back in its holder in the kitchen. The note itself was unlike any ransom note ever seen in a legitimate kidnapping case. First, the length, 2.5 pages. Practice drafts were found in the pad as well. Someone had started writing the note, stopped, started over. Ransom notes in real kidnappings are typically short, to the point. Get the money, get out. But this note rambled. It included movie quotes, references to Southern common sense, and the two gentlemen watching over your daughter. It instructed John to be well rested before delivering the ransom. It mentioned his business, Access Graphics, specifically. And again, that number, $118,000, John's exact bonus amount. The FBI's analysis was damning. They concluded this was very likely a staged ransom note written by someone in the house, someone who knew the family intimately, someone who had time to sit and write and rewrite. Because kidnappers don't break into a house, spend time writing a multi-page ransom note using materials from inside the house, then kill their victim and leave her body in the basement. It made no sense. Handwriting analysis focused immediately on Patsy Ramsey. Multiple experts examined her handwriting samples against the ransom note. Some concluded she could not be eliminated as the writer. Others said the handwriting wasn't a match. John's handwriting was ruled out by most experts. But Patsy's handwriting showed similarities in letter formation, spacing, and specific quirks that appeared in the ransom note. The lowercase letter A formed the same way. The way certain letters connected, the spacing and margins. Nothing was definitive enough to prove she wrote it, but it was enough to make her a focus of the investigation. And then there was the linguistics analysis. The language used in the note didn't sound like a foreign faction or criminal gang. It sounded like someone familiar with the family, with John's business, with the house layout. Phrases like, "We respect your business but not the country that it serves," sounded theatrical, written by someone trying to sound like a kidnapper from a movie rather than an actual criminal. Experts noted the writers seemed to try to disguise their education and writing style but slipped up repeatedly, revealing a fairly educated person trying to sound less educated. What do you think about that ransom note? Could Patsy have written it? Could someone else in that house have been involved? Drop your theories in the comments below, because this case has divided people for nearly 3 decades, and every piece of evidence seems to point in a different direction. The Boulder police immediately focused on the family. In kidnapping cases, statistically, family members are involved in the vast majority of staged kidnappings, and everything about this scene screamed staging to experienced investigators. But there was a problem. The Ramseys hired lawyers within days, high-powered defense attorneys who immediately advised them to stop cooperating with police. John and Patsy gave initial statements at the house on December 26th, but they wouldn't sit for formal police interviews for 4 months. And when they finally did agree to interviews in April 1997, they came with conditions. Separate interviews, lawyers present, limited time, specific topics off limits. This created a massive rift between the Ramsey family and Boulder police. The police felt the family was hiding something, refusing to help find their daughter's killer. The Ramseys claimed they were being unfairly targeted, that Boulder police had tunnel vision and refused to investigate other suspects. Both sides dug in, and as months turned into years, the case grew colder. But let's examine the evidence that made investigators suspect the family. First, there was no sign of forced entry anywhere in the house. Every door, every window was either locked or showed no evidence of being used to enter. One basement window had a broken pane, but John Ramsey explained he'd broken that himself months earlier when he was locked out. Spiderwebs across that window were intact, suggesting no one had gone through it recently. So how did an intruder get in? The Ramseys claimed they weren't sure if they'd locked every door that night. Maybe the killer entered through an unlocked door, but neighbors reported seeing lights on in the house at unusual times that night. Some heard a scream around midnight. If an intruder was in the house, how did they know the layout? The wine cellar where JonBenét was found was in a confusing part of the basement, not easily discovered by someone unfamiliar with the house. Then there was the behavior of the family members. John appeared calm, controlled, even detached according to some observers. He'd been on the phone with his pilot that morning, arranging to fly to Atlanta that afternoon, which struck investigators as odd for a father whose daughter had supposedly been kidnapped. Patsy's behavior was described as theatrical by some, genuinely distraught by others. She wore the same clothes from the night before, hadn't showered or changed. She'd taken Valium and been somewhat sedated. But was her grief real or performed? And Burke. 9-year-old Burke Ramsey was in the house that night. Initially, parents said he slept through everything and didn't wake up until after police arrived. But the enhanced 911 call suggested he might have been awake during that call. His voice possibly captured asking, "What did you find?" in the background. When police interviewed Burke days later, his affect seemed unusual. He appeared unconcerned, detached, almost cheerful when discussing his sister's death. But he was 9 years old, possibly in shock, possibly not understanding the gravity of what happened. Child behavior experts disagreed on whether his demeanor was suspicious or simply a child's way of coping with trauma. Investigators found something else suspicious: the pineapple. During the autopsy, partially digested pineapple was found in JonBenét's stomach. Pineapple that, based on digestion rates, she'd eaten within hours of her death. But the Ramseys insisted she'd fallen asleep in the car and been carried straight to bed. She hadn't eaten anything after they got home, they claimed. So where did the pineapple come from? On the kitchen table, police found a bowl of pineapple with a spoon in it. Fingerprints on that bowl belonged to Burke and Patsy, not JonBenét's fingerprints, interestingly. So how did pineapple end up in JonBenét's stomach? Did someone feed it to her? Did she come downstairs and eat some herself? If she woke up and came downstairs, why did the parents say she went straight to bed and never woke up? This small detail became huge because it directly contradicted the family's timeline of events. The grand jury heard testimony for 13 months, from 1998 to 1999. They examined over 30,000 pieces of evidence, heard from dozens of witnesses, reviewed expert testimony on handwriting, forensics, linguistics, child psychology, and pathology. In October 1999, they reached a decision, but District Attorney Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment. He announced there was insufficient evidence to prosecute anyone, and the case would remain open. The public was told the grand jury had voted no bill, meaning they didn't find enough evidence to indict anyone. But that was a lie. In 2013, 14 years later, the grand jury documents were unsealed by court order, and what they revealed shocked everyone who'd followed the case. The grand jury had voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey, not for murder directly, but for child abuse resulting in death, and for accessory to a crime. The indictment stated that John and Patsy did unlawfully, knowingly, recklessly, and feloniously permit a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation which posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in the death of JonBenét Ramsey. The second count stated they did render assistance to a person with intent to hinder, delay, and prevent the discovery, detention, apprehension, prosecution, conviction, and punishment of such person for the commission of a crime, knowing the person being assisted has committed and was suspected of the crime of murder in the first degree and child abuse resulting in death. Read that carefully. The grand jury believed the Ramseys knew who killed JonBenét and helped that person avoid prosecution. They believed the parents created a situation that led to her death and then covered up the crime. But Alex Hunter, the district attorney, chose not to prosecute. He claimed the evidence wasn't strong enough to win at trial. But many believe he simply didn't want to take on a high-profile case against a wealthy, well-connected family unless he was absolutely certain of victory. So if the parents didn't directly murder JonBenét but helped cover up the crime, who did the grand jury think was responsible? The indictment language suggested they believed someone in the house killed her, someone the parents then protected. The only other person in the house that night was 9-year-old Burke. The theory that has gained the most traction over the years, particularly among investigators who worked the case, is this: Burke accidentally or intentionally struck JonBenét in the head during an argument or conflict, perhaps over the pineapple, perhaps over a Christmas toy, perhaps something else entirely. The blow was severe enough to fracture her skull and cause fatal brain injury. The parents, discovering what happened, panicked. They couldn't call 911, couldn't let their son be taken into custody, couldn't face the public shame and legal consequences. So they staged a kidnapping gone wrong. This theory explains the ransom note, written by Patsy, with time to write and rewrite it, using materials from inside the house. It explains the garrote and strangulation, staging to make it look like an intruder murder. It explains the lack of forced entry because there was no intruder. It explains the parents' immediate lawyering up and refusing to cooperate with police because they had something to hide. And it explains the grand jury indictment. They couldn't prove who struck the fatal blow, but they believed the parents knew and covered it up. But there are problems with this theory too. Could a 9-year-old generate enough force to create that skull fracture? Experts disagree. Some say absolutely, if he used a heavy object like a flashlight or baseball bat. Others say the amount of force required suggests an adult. The strangulation, the garrote itself. Could parents really do that to their child's body, even if she was already dying or dead? Some investigators believe the garrote was part of the staging, that JonBenét was already dead or dying from the head injury when it was applied, so the parents weren't actively killing her but making it look like a violent intruder murder. What about DNA evidence? This is where the case gets even more complicated. Investigators found DNA on JonBenét's underwear and long johns that didn't match any family member. Touch DNA, minimal amounts. But there, the DNA was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database, but no match was ever found. In 2008, District Attorney Mary Lacey used this DNA evidence to officially exonerate the Ramsey family, issuing a public apology and declaring an intruder must have been responsible. But many investigators and forensic experts strongly disagreed with that exoneration. They argued the DNA was such a small amount that it could have come from manufacturing of the clothing, from handling before purchase, from any number of innocent sources. Touch DNA is notoriously unreliable as evidence because we transfer DNA constantly through simple contact. The DNA could have been from a factory worker who packaged the underwear, a store clerk who handled it, anyone. It didn't prove an intruder was in the house that night. Then in 2016, the CBS documentary, The Case of JonBenét Ramsey, aired, featuring investigators and experts who explicitly laid out the theory that Burke was responsible and the parents covered it up. Burke Ramsey sued CBS and the production company for $750 million, claiming defamation. The case was settled in 2019 for undisclosed terms, with no admission of wrongdoing by CBS. Burke had also sued another expert who'd written about the case, settling that lawsuit as well. But the fact that lawsuits were filed and settled rather than going to trial meant no evidence was presented in court, no testimony was given under oath, and the public still had no definitive answers. John Ramsey has maintained his innocence and his family's innocence consistently for 28 years. Patsy Ramsey died in 2006 from ovarian cancer, never charged with any crime, maintaining until her death that an intruder killed her daughter. Burke Ramsey gave his first public interview in 2016 on Dr. Phil, where he denied any involvement and said he believed an intruder was responsible, though he admitted he'd been downstairs that night playing after everyone went to bed, contradicting earlier statements. There have been numerous other suspects over the years. John Mark Carr infamously confessed to the murder in 2006, claiming he was with JonBenét when she died and it was an accident. He was arrested in Thailand and extradited to Colorado, but his DNA didn't match. His confession contained numerous factual errors about the crime, and he was released. He'd been obsessed with the case but had nothing to do with the actual murder. Other suspects included a man named Gary Oliva, a convicted sex offender who lived near the Ramseys and allegedly confessed to a friend years later. But his DNA didn't match either. There were theories about workers who'd been in the house during Christmas tours. Wealthy Boulder families would open their homes for holiday tours, and numerous strangers had been through the Ramsey house in the weeks before the murder. But none of these leads panned out. Michael Helgoth was another suspect, a local man who allegedly made suspicious statements about the case and died by suicide shortly after. Some investigators looked into him seriously, but again, no physical evidence connected him to the crime. Each suspect would gain traction, be investigated, and ultimately be ruled out. The Boulder Police Department and the District Attorney's Office had a falling out over the handling of the case that lasted years. Police felt the DA's office was too soft on the Ramseys, too willing to accept their lawyer's restrictions on interviews and evidence collection. The DA's office felt the police were too focused on the family and ignoring other leads. This rift severely damaged the investigation, with different agencies sometimes working against each other rather than together. In 2010, the case was reopened under new leadership with a fresh look at all evidence. Advanced DNA technology has continued to be applied to evidence from the case, looking for new matches or more complete DNA profiles. But as of 2024, no arrests have been made. The case remains officially unsolved, though many investigators privately believe they know what happened. They just can't prove it in court beyond a reasonable doubt. Here's what we know with certainty. A 6-year-old girl was murdered in her own home on Christmas night in one of the most brutal ways imaginable. Evidence suggests she was struck in the head with tremendous force, causing a massive skull fracture. She was strangled with a garrote fashioned from materials in her own home. She had injuries suggesting possible sexual abuse, though whether that happened the night of her death or previously remains disputed. A ransom note was written using materials from inside the house, a note that makes no sense in the context of a real kidnapping. There was no forced entry to the home. The crime scene was contaminated before it could be properly processed, and the family hired lawyers and stopped cooperating with police almost immediately. Those are facts. Everything else, who actually killed JonBenét, whether it was an intruder or someone in the family, whether Burke was involved, whether the parents covered up an accident, remains speculation. Educated speculation based on evidence, but speculation nonetheless. No one has ever been charged. No one has ever been convicted. And the one person who could definitively answer what happened that night is gone forever. The impact of this case reaches far beyond one family in Boulder, Colorado. It changed how police handle crime scenes involving children. It highlighted the problems with small-town police departments investigating complex homicides beyond their experience level. It demonstrated how wealth and powerful lawyers can affect criminal investigations. And it showed how media coverage can both help and harm a case, keeping it in the public eye but also creating such a circus atmosphere that finding the truth becomes nearly impossible. JonBenét's grave in Marietta, Georgia reads 6-Dec 1990, 25-Dec 1996. Though young, she touched the hearts of many. Her short life was spent performing in beauty pageants, singing, dancing, bringing joy to her parents and those who watched her perform. Whether that world of child pageants somehow contributed to her death remains another unanswered question. Some believe it made her visible to predators. Others believe it was irrelevant to what happened that Christmas night. But the image of JonBenét in her pageant costumes, blonde hair perfectly styled, makeup carefully applied on a 6-year-old face, became inseparable from the tragedy of her death. 28 years later, advances in DNA technology offer new hope. The genetic genealogy techniques that have solved cold cases like the Golden State Killer could potentially be applied to the unknown DNA in this case, if enough genetic material exists to build a family tree. But even if that DNA leads to a person, proving that person was in the house that night, proving they committed the murder, would still be extraordinarily difficult after nearly 3 decades. John Ramsey, now in his 80s, continues to advocate for further DNA testing and investigation. He's pushed for the evidence to be sent to independent labs, for the case to be handed to federal investigators, for anything that might finally bring answers. Whether those answers would implicate someone else or bring the investigation back to his own family is something he seems willing to risk, at least publicly. He maintains that an intruder killed his daughter, that his family has been unjustly suspected for decades, and that the real killer has never been caught. Burke Ramsey, now in his mid-30s, has largely stayed out of the public eye since his 2016 interviews. He's described the lifelong suspicion he's faced as devastating, the way people look at him, the way his sister's death has defined his entire life. Whether he's an innocent victim of circumstance, wrongly accused by internet sleuths and some investigators, or whether he knows more than he's ever said, only he truly knows. The 3 main theories remain the same after 28 years. Theory 1, an intruder, someone who'd been in the house during holiday tours or had some connection to the family, broke in that night with the intention of kidnapping or harming JonBenét. They wrote the ransom note as part of the plan, but something went wrong. They panicked, killed her, and fled, managing to leave behind only minimal DNA evidence. Theory 2, Patsy Ramsey, in a fit of rage over bedwetting or some other behavioral issue, struck JonBenét in the head, then staged the kidnapping and strangulation to cover up what she'd done. John discovered what happened and helped with the cover-up, or believed Patsy's story about an intruder. Theory 3. Burke, in a moment of anger or jealousy, struck his sister with an object, causing the fatal head injury. The parents discovered what happened and made the decision to stage a kidnapping to protect their son, knowing they couldn't call for help without destroying their family. Each theory has evidence supporting it. Each theory has problems that don't quite fit. And that's why, 28 years later, we're still talking about this case, still analyzing the evidence, still searching for answers. What really happened in that Boulder mansion on Christmas night 1996 may never be fully known. The truth died with JonBenét, but what we can do is remember her not just as a murder victim or a cold case file number, but as a 6-year-old girl who loved to sing and dance, who was excited about Christmas, who had her whole life ahead of her. Whatever happened that night, however she died, and whoever was responsible, she deserved better. She deserved to grow up. She deserved justice. And 28 years later, she still hasn't gotten it. The JonBenét Ramsey case remains officially open. If you have any information about this case, the Boulder Police Department continues to accept tips. The family has offered a reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of JonBenét's killer. And somewhere, in an evidence room in Boulder, Colorado, pieces of evidence still wait. A ransom note, DNA samples, clothing, photographs. Everything needed to solve this case. If only we could put the pieces together in the right way. If this case intrigued you, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Vault for more in-depth investigations. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts. What's your theory on what really happened that Christmas night? Do you think the family was involved, or do you believe an intruder committed this crime? And remember, these aren't just stories. These are real people, real lives, and real mysteries that deserve to be remembered. JonBenét Ramsey deserves to be remembered not just as a cold case, but as a little girl whose life was stolen far too soon. Until justice is served, her case will continue to haunt everyone who's touched it, everyone who's studied it, and everyone who refuses to let her be forgotten.